Good morning. I'm Jason Marzak, Vice President, Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Adrian Arch Latin America Center, and I'm thrilled to be joined today with Paraguay's Minister of Foreign Relations, Ruben Ramirez, who I'll introduce in a moment. We are closely monitoring the fast-evolving situation in Venezuela as new developments continue to surface by the moment following Sunday's election, in which the opposition has collected proof to show that the vote tallies announced by the National Electoral Council do not coincide with the votes announced by the Maduro's National Electoral Council. Voting tabulations have been put online by the opposition to show that Edmundo Gonzalez won across the country. The opposition has results from 81% of polling stations that give Gonzalez 67% of the vote against Maduro's 30%, with a lead of nearly 4 million votes. One of the only observers on the ground, the Carter Center, said yesterday that the election, quote, did not meet international standards of electoral integrity and cannot be considered democratic, and that it cannot verify or corroborate the results of the election declared by the National Electoral Council, end quote. We've seen massive protests. For Penal reports, nearly 300 people have been detained as of last night, with the government reporting even higher numbers. As well, Jorge Rodriguez, the National Assembly president, and Diosdado Cabello, the vice president of Maduro's party, the PSUV, have called for prison for Gonzalez and Maria Corina Machado. The regional response has been swift and also spanned ideological spectrums. Paraguay was joined by Argentina, Chile, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Guatemala, Panama, Peru, Paraguay, Dominican Republic, and Uruguay to express their profound concern with the vote and to call for a complete revision with independent international observers. They've also called for a meeting of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States, which will happen this afternoon. In response, Maduro demanded the diplomatic personnel from Chile, Argentina, Costa Rica, Peru, Panama, the Dominican Republic, and Uruguay leave the country. As well, the White House has said that, quote, there are clear signs that the election results announced by Venezuela's National Electoral Council do not reflect the will of the Venezuelan people, end quote. To discuss the developments and what may lie ahead, I'm very pleased and honored to be joined by Foreign Minister Ramirez, who has served his current role now for just about a year. He also served as foreign minister from 2006 to 2008, and he's held various diplomatic positions since 1989, having served in Argentina, Ecuador, France, and the U.S., and also served in many multilateral organizations, including the UN, the World Trade Organization, UNESCO, and CAF Development Bank of Latin America. As well, President Santiago Peña nominated him last month for the position of Secretary General of the Organization of American States. And Mr. Ramirez is currently in Washington for this afternoon's meeting of the OAS Permanent Council. Minister, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here in Atlantic Council to share our view about the situation on Venezuela democratic process. Really, we are very concerned on the situation of the Venezuelan people, and that is the reason why we agreed to come here with several other colleagues, Minister of Foreign Affairs from our region, to discuss the solutions on the situation on democratic process in Venezuela.
Minister, how do you see the situation this morning? And how is this moment in Venezuela, do you see different from the past?
Well, it's quite important to highlight the process that we have had with Venezuela before. Paraguay commitment regarding the electoral process in Venezuela means our commitment on democracy. In 2018, elections in Venezuela were considered not to be free and fair, which is why early 2018, Paraguay decided to stop and to break the relation with Venezuela. The reason is because Paraguay support a lot democracy's process on transparency and the election of the freedom of the country. Secondly, Paraguay admitted Juan Guaido as president of Venezuela, and the broken relation with Venezuela were reconsidered by President Peña in November 2023. The decision by President Peña about the relation with Venezuela was because we need to be close from the people of Venezuela to understand the process. We received a commitment from the government of Nicolás Maduro to go with the democratic process in a clean election and open to all the countries. The deterioration in the last days, month, I can say, because Nicolás Maduro didn't admit the competitors like Maria Corina Machado, and we make a strong statement with other countries to call to make the free participation of all the candidates. Then in July 28, last day, the Republic of Venezuela celebrate presidential elections where Nicolás Maduro again keep no clear results of the process. And that is why several countries called to the government of Venezuela to give the opportunity of the transparency on this election.
Mr. I'm gonna jump in here. That communique that you're mentioning, 10 countries, including Paraguay, signed on to that communique that was released on Monday morning. It was simply impressive, the speed with which that was achieved. How was that possible to be able to get this group that actually spans different political ideologies to all sign on to this joint communique so quickly?
Yes, because we work very close. We discuss among us, and to keep the democracy in our region, that is the main issue. We don't have any candidate in Venezuela. We don't support any candidate in Venezuela. We are supporting the clear and the transparency in the democratic process to elect the next president and to keep the decision of the Venezuelans that they have the right to decide who will be the next president in this country. I remember in July 19, 2024, Paraguay, Argentina, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Guatemala, Panama, Peru, and Uruguay openly condemned the political violence and harassment suffered by the Venezuela opposition. That means that you are very right, Jason, highlighting that we have not the same political view. Paraguay, in its foreign policy, doesn't have ideologies position. We are not left, right. We are looking right for our development, for our integration, and we need to create the condition for the dialogue. We can have different point of view, but the discussion always is the way to make a very strong understanding among our countries and our political, social integration. In July 28, Paraguay, Argentina, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Guatemala, Panama, Peru, and Dominican Republic and Uruguay put not a joint statement calling on the Venezuelan government to fully recognize and respect the results of the electoral process and the voices of the Venezuelan people to express through the ballots. In July 29, Paraguay signed joint statement alongside Argentina, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Guatemala, Panama, Peru, Dominican Republic, and Uruguay, demanding a complete revision of the electoral results and call an urgent meeting of the Organization of American States Permanent Council, which are we attending this afternoon. The President Peña expressed his serious concern about the ongoing uncertainties derived from the results published by Venezuela's National Electoral Council and alongside other heads of state, request that the electoral tally spreads he reviewed so as to guarantee the security and legitimacy of the electoral process. That is where we are now, looking because with concern the tensions in Caracas and other cities in Venezuela, and the dialogue is the way to get through the transparency that the government of Venezuela has to show with transparency of the results of the election process.
Well, thank you, Minister. And again, it's impressive the work that Paraguay has done alongside regional partner countries so quickly, both leading up to the vote and after the election on Sunday. In a few hours, you're going to be going over to the OAS for the Permanent Council meeting, which is one of the things that Paraguay, along with the other countries, called for happening quickly. What do you hope to have come out of this afternoon's Permanent Council meeting?
We think that always the declaration, the statements of the government is quite important to call the attention of the process in Venezuela. But we need to react. We need to go to the action, and we will discuss among the member state of OAS the different alternatives. It's the second time that we have the same situation in Venezuela. The last time we didn't arrive to keep a real democracy in this country. This time we have the hope that the Venezuelan country will develop a transparency and very open election, but we need to have all the information to recognize and to give legitimacy to the government of Venezuela. Could be Nicolás Maduro or could be Edmundo González Urrutia.
Minister, you mentioned the importance of creating the conditions for dialogue. As you look forward, what is that balance? What is that balance of pressure, which has been used for years to try to exact change and ensure that Maduro tries to move in the direction of democracy, which we've seen on Sunday, the election result where the will of the Venezuelan people, according to the results put out by the tabulations the opposition has access to, the will of the Venezuelan people has not been respected by the actions of the National Electoral Council. So what's that balance of pressure and dialogue that you think regional countries should aspire to try to push for the respect of the vote, of respect of the will of the Venezuelan people? What are the levers and how to kind of push those levers to be able to use this moment? This is a different moment, I think, than what Venezuela has been in previously.
We have facts in front of us. The one is Maria Corina Machado showed to the international community the result of 75 acts of the election in Venezuela. All the countries in our region, in OAS country members also, we are calling to the Venezuelan government, to the officialist government, to show the report of the Consejo Nacional Electoral from Venezuela. We need transparency on that. And if they couldn't show that, the legitimacy of the government of Venezuela is in the very, very wrong situation. And we will discuss among those issues today and what kind of action we can develop all together, because the dialogue among the countries is quite important to have a common understanding how to deal with this situation in Venezuela today.
Minister, I want to ask you about the situation about Paraguay itself. Yesterday, President Peña recalled on CNN the situation of Paraguay. and Paraguay's own experience. He noted that Paraguay, quote, Paraguay is one of the last countries that made the transition to democracy. And Paraguay's experience affect your approach, your perspectives to the situation in Venezuela?
Yes, absolutely. President Peña highlighted that we have had 35 years of dictatorship government. And we have moral responsibility on that because only through the last 35 years, since 1989, we started our democracy process in Paraguay. Our country could develop and be today a country is strong economically, integrated socially, and that means the most important opportunity. We are not, we respect the situation of every country. We respect the internal decision of each country, but discussing about democracy is another issue. We are responsible to promote democracy, to promote freedom, to promote human rights, and that is that we are doing in our responsibility and commitment on democracy.
Other actions that Maduro could take, I mentioned the outset, the calls for arrest of leading opposition figures just in the last 24 hours of Edmundo Gonzalez and
I can't hear.
Perspective that would lead to a further escalation of concern, of perhaps pressure from whether Paraguay or other regional governments which you've been in contact with?
We are trying to give all the pressure, but also talking with other governments that they haven't up to now a pronunciation about the situation in Venezuela. That means not about ideology. That means about the importance of a democracy, the electoral process with transparency, and we are pushing on that. We sorry very much the decision of the Nicolas Maduro government to close the embassy of several countries. Among we were pronouncing in a statement during this week. That represent also a cut of the opportunity to establish a dialogue among government and opposition in Venezuela. We are not committed with a candidate. We are committed with the process. I reiterate this issue because we respect the internal affairs of Venezuela, the integrity of the country, the right of the people to elect and be elected, and that is our main issue today.
Thank you for that. You're here in Washington for the OAS meetings we've talked about, but of course it looms large the role of the United States, and I want to ask from your perspective, from Paraguay's perspective. Again, you've been talking with other countries in the region. There's been some calls within the United States specifically for the administration to take an even bolder stance, both in rhetoric and in action to some of the unfolding events. What do you see as the balance between the role of regional governments and that of the United States, and perhaps even the role of Europe? The Spanish foreign minister has made some pronouncements as well. So how do you see countries outside of Latin America and the Caribbean optimally playing the most effective role as part of this process?
Today, we will have a very important discussion in the US. That is the opportunity to have a clear position of each country. Really, that is the opportunity to discuss what kind of solution could we give to the situation in Venezuela. Really, it's important to have the position of each country and to give the people of Venezuela the hope that they can have the government that they elect. United States, Canada, and Caribbean countries, I hope that they can share with us the point of view. The Secretary Blinken and even the White House make a statement calling for the transparency of the results of the election process in Venezuela. But also we need to discuss what happened since now in the process if the government doesn't share with the international community the test and the results of the election and all the documents on the Consejo Nacional Electoral.
And Minister, I'm going to ask you a last.
I doesn't hear.
In Colombia who will close. But Mr. There are people watching from, of course, across the United States, across Latin America, across the Caribbean, and people likely tuning in today from Venezuela as well, and around the world, frankly. What are some of the last thoughts that you would like to share with Venezuelans who are tuning into today's conversation?
Well, it's important that today all the international community is calling Venezuela government to share the report of the election. The information is quite important for the legitimacy of the government elected. And even the EU and other countries, we are, as Paraguay, we are calling them to give us the opportunity to consider the situation that in which are today Venezuela. The social tension in Venezuela doesn't help. We need to keep the security of the people of Venezuela. You know what happened in the last years, the immigration of Venezuelan among not only in developed country, but also in our region, means that the situation is quite difficult for those people. We need the answer for the international community today.
Other countries insofar as how further destabilization in Venezuela has impacts beyond Venezuela's borders. You mentioned migration specifically right now. Of course, there's been criminal activity as part of some of the ways in which Maduro has sought to avoid sanctions. But what are some of your concerns so far as the regional reverberations of increased instability?
Look, Jason, in the world there are 52 conflicts. The geopolitical tension most evident are among the relation of China and Taiwan, the situation of Russia, Ukraine, the situation of Israel, Hamas, but there are more than 50 conflicts in the world. Latin America is the only country in which there is peace. And we hope that the situation in Venezuela doesn't change the balance. The impact of this situation is not very well for Latin America. That give an image of disorder in our region. And but especially we are worried by the Venezuelans people on their situation, because the country economically has several challenges to keep the social inclusion, the development that they need for the conditions of the people.
Ms. a very busy schedule. You just arrived in Washington only a few hours ago, so I appreciate it, and also appreciate the leadership of Paraguay, yourself, President Peña, and the other countries which you are working with to ensure that the will of the Venezuelan people is seen, heard, and respected and adhered to. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to my colleague Jeff Ramsey, our senior fellow for Venezuela and Colombia, to close out the discussion.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, Jason. And I just want to thank you, Minister Ramirez, for all the work that you're doing to coordinate a multilateral, Latin American-led response to the current situation in Venezuela. We at the Adrian Arch Latin America Center at the Atlantic Council have been deeply committed to supporting a democratic solution in Venezuela that respects Venezuelans' fundamental right to elect their leaders. Over the last year, we've worked diligently to facilitate efforts behind the scenes and publicly to try to bring together stakeholders from across the spectrum to advance a democratic opening. On Sunday, Venezuelans voted, and now their will must be respected. Earlier this week, we hosted a discussion of this election with representatives of the Venezuelan opposition, analysts, independent journalists to discuss next steps, and we'll continue to be following the situation as it unfolds in the coming days and weeks. Before the election, we also worked with Florida International University to publish a new memo offering recommendations on how the U.S. government can advance a democratic transition. This builds off of the work of our newly launched Venezuela Solutions Group, a multi-sectoral working group dedicated to advancing political agreements and securing a democratic transition in Venezuela that restores their fundamental right to elect their own leaders. This group will be convening in the coming weeks, and we encourage you all to follow the work of our Solutions Group as well as our work on Venezuela across the Atlantic Council as we work to promote a coordinated multilateral response to the crisis and efforts to advance a genuine democratic solution that respects the will of the people. As we move forward, we know it's imperative for Latin America and U.S. policymakers to stay in close touch. We know the value of regional multilateralism, and just want to thank you again for joining us, and thank you, Minister Ramirez, for all of your efforts, and good luck today at the Organization of American States.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you very much, Jeff and Adrian. Really is a pleasure to be here in Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C.
Quiero que aunque norte y sur sean distintos, lleven un mismo latido en el ritmo, como quien comparte el mismo apellido, porque al fin y al cabo somos latinos. Quiero que la unión que logra la fuerza rompa divisiones y abra más puertas. Quiero que entendamos que cuando todos sumamos se hace